There's a principle, very fundamental principle. It's mentioned by the Moral of Prague, and it's attributed to the Moral of Prague. But Rabbi Bachya also mentions this, that we know numbers have great significance. The world was created in 7 days. It's referred to Shivas Yemei Bereshis, the 7 days of creation. 7 always connotes the natural order. Nature is 7. The world was created in 7 days. 8 always supersedes the 7. That's called Lamala Minatev. That's supernatural. 8 always is supernatural. 7 is always the natural order. For instance, circumcision, Milah, is on the 8th day. A child is born naturally circumcised, uncircumcised. So you would say that's the way he's supposed to be. So naturally, a child has a foreskin. The Torah says, B'yom hashmini yimol b'sar lo. So on the 8th day, you must circumcise the covering of his flesh. It must be removed. So that's something not within the natural order you must remove. So that's 8. The Torah itself is God's wisdom. That precedes nature. That precedes existence. As the Gemara says, Torah existed 974 generations before existence. It has no relevance to existence. Existence is only the setting for the fulfillment of the Torah. But the Torah is independent of existence. As a result of that, it's always connoted through 8. The giving of Torah, Shavuos, was on the 50th day. What I'm telling you now is the Moral of Prague. 50 is the number after 7 times 7. That's 50. 50 is the equivalent of 8. Therefore, when did we become God's people, the Am Hashem, on the 50th day, which is 8? The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he officiated with 8 vestments, not with 7 vestments, because his activity, his relevance is to Hashem. So that his relevance to God is always 8. That's L'Mala Min HaTeva. That always supersedes, that transcends the natural order. And we find Shmini Atzeres is always 8. For 7 days we sit in a sukkah. On the 8th day, we no longer have sukkah. And what the Chazal tell us, what is Shmini Atzeres? Kosher lai predaschem. It's difficult for me to part with you. So 7 is natural, 8 is always supernatural. That transcends the 7. The Midrash tells us that really Shmini Atzeres should have been 50 days after Sukkot, as Shavuos is 50 days after Pesach, from the beginning of Pesach. If you count from the time we left Egypt, it's 50 days. Except because if that would have been the case, it would have come out in the middle of the winter, and we'd have to trudge through the snow and the rain. Therefore, Hashem wanted to make it easy for us, and he says, you were here for 7 days, stay for an 8th day. But the 8th day is the equivalent of Kabbalah Torah. And that's the reason why we have Simchas Torah on Shmini Atzeres, for that reason. Because Shmini Atzeres is the equivalent of the 50th day, which is the giving of Torah at Sinai. This is the understanding. But really, Shmini Atzeres should have been 50 days after Sukkot began, because it's the equivalent of the giving of the Torah. It's always 50 days later. And that's when we have that relation with him. 50 is 8, which transcends the physical order. So I was bothered. We find that the menorah in the Mishkan was 7. There were 7 lights. 7 is always natural. It's not the supernatural, correct? So if that's the case, we should have had 8 lights, right? The reason why we light 8 lights on Hanukkah, because the miracle was an 8-day miracle. That's why. It's not because the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash was 8. The menorah in the Beis Hamikdash was 7, was not 8. We light that extra candle, the extra light, only to what? To commemorate, to memorialize the Nes, which was 8 days. So why do we have 7 lights? We should have 8 lights, according to what we're speaking about. This was bothering me. So we had mentioned last week, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh had said regarding the Sota ritual, the water that's given to her and the dust which is taken off the earth, which is put into that water. The water is referred to as Mayim Kedoshim, holy water. Where was that water taken from? It was taken from the Kior. The Kior is the laver. So he had cited the Orach Chaim HaKodesh when God separated the upper waters from the lower waters. The lower waters came with a complaint. I'm detached from the source of all existence. The upper waters have that relationship with Hashem. The lower waters are now separated. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu originally had said that the location of my presence preferably is on the terrestrial level, not the celestial level. Therefore, initially the water was called Mayim Bochim. It was the weeping water. The water was weeping because it was denied that relationship with Hashem. Hashem says, no, my main interest is to be on the terrestrial level with mankind. Because Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas became a problem. He putrefied because he introduced evil into existence. God separated himself and ascended from this existence. The Mishkan, or the Beis Hamikdash, is the original intent of creation, that the terrestrial level is the celestial level, even more so. Therefore, the water which you find in the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash, that water is the equivalent of Mayim Elyonim. That is the water, even more so than the water you find in the celestial level. That's what it is. And the dust on the ground, that's untainted dust. He says, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, that the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash itself, that terrestrial level is the equivalent of Kodem Achet. That was Kodem Achet, before the sin of Adam. Okay? As a result of that, now let's talk. There's, we had mentioned circumcision Milah. Adam was created without a foreskin. Man was not meant to have a foreskin. The foreskin is an expression of the Ra of the Eitz Hadas. The foreskin only grew on on Adam only after the age of the Eitz Hadas. So now Adam is the physical being. He's no longer that special spiritual being. And therefore he has this covering. Now 8, what does 8 say? So now, based on the present state, what's the natural state? You're supposed to have a foreskin. But God says that's not the way it's supposed to be. So within the context of nature now, you must remove that foreskin. The orla must be removed. So that's 8. Now it transcends the 7. But initially, what was 7? 7 was Teva was supernatural. Before Ra was introduced into existence, 7 was the state of the spiritual. That was the spiritual status, because there was no such thing as physical, which was the material. The material itself, the terrestrial had a celestial status. That was its classification. So it's only anything which has relevance to after the Chet manifests itself in 8. So we had said Moshe Rabbeinu needed no vestments to officiate, because we said his body was the vestment. Aaron, who was not on that level, he needed 8 vestments. So the 8 is only to connote the status of the human being. The human being after the Chet, he's locked into 7. 7 is not the original intention of existence, of Bria. Therefore, he has to wear 8 vestments, because 8 always connotes the supernatural. That's the 8, always transcend. We left Egypt. We were idolaters. We had to go through a process. We have Memte Shari Tuma, the 29 gates of impurity. We had to ascend to the 49th gate of purity. But when was the Torah given? On the 50th. The 50th is 8, because that follows the 7 times 7. That's vis-a-vis us. We being locked into the 7, being physical beings because of the Chet of Adam Rishon, therefore we had to transcend to the 50, which was the given Torah at Sinai. As a result of that, what happened at Sinai? We reverted back to Kodem Achet. The Jews, if they wouldn't have sinned with the Chet Egel, we would have lived eternally. Because when we locked in on that 50th level, then we went back to the pre-sin state. That's what happened at Sinai. We find that in the Beis Hamikdash, one of the miracles that was in the Beis Hamikdash was Omdim Tzvufim U'Mushtachvim Revochim. We stood pressed in, hundreds of thousands of people in this very limited location. But when it came, we heard the Shem Hashem, we prostrated ourselves. There was enough room to prostrate. How is it possible? That was one of the miracles. The answer is that location is not bound, is not a finite location. In terms of its physical makeup, it's finite. But in terms of its significance and its essence is spiritual. Therefore, it's unlimited. There's no limitation there. Therefore, it's omdin tzvufim shtachim revochim. We find one of the miracles when Moshe installed Aaron. It says he took all the Jews and had them Pesach Ol Moed. He had them all stand in the entrance to Ol Moed to see Aaron being instated as the Kohen Gadol. And Rashi cites that's one of the few locations, Miat Machzik is Hamaruba, that a small location is able to contain very large numbers. I mean, how do you have minimally 1 million people standing at the entrance of the Ol Moed to witness Aaron being inaugurated, installed, initiated as the Kohen Gadol? How do you do such a thing? The answer is because what was that location? That location is Kodem Achet. The significance is Prison. The klola, the curse of Adam, has no relevance to that location. Therefore, the concept of Mu'at Machzik Zimruba is not a question, because it's not limited to physical capacity, because its significance and its value is the equivalent of pre-sin.